Another pay-per-view card. March feels like Christmas for us MMA fans. And speaking of us MMA fans, there's two fighters with the last name Nurmagomedov that are also fighting this weekend. One related to Khabib, one not. Saeed is going to be taking on a young man by the name of Jonathan Martinez. And then Usman is going to be fighting Benson Henderson for the belt in Bellator, the 155 belt. 24 years old, defending his belt for the first time. Seems like the Nurmagomedov legacy is just carrying on exactly where Khabib left it. So I'm excited for both of those fights. Obviously, Benson Henderson is a more known and tougher opponent than Jonathan Martinez, but I'm kind of looking for two Nurmagomedov victories this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And Benson's been around the block for forever, and people know he's a great fighter, but he's also a big name, especially over in Bellator. And it just seems fitting for him to get another title shot in Bellator. And I think that, you know, they're trying to build some of these guys over in Bellator, and they don't want to take former UFC fighters anymore. They really do want to create their own stable of guys who come up, and that sort of creates this, you know, allure and illusion that Bellator is the same level as the UFC, not a level of slightly under where former UFC fighters
They're not
go
taking
to
the
live out.
UFC cast-offs anymore. They're
Right.
building their own stable of fighters.
Right, and you know, if they keep looking for these guys that are on the come up, like a Nurmagomedov, they'll be able to take some of the best talent in the world, truly, and keep them, you know, under their banner, and that person will never go to the UFC, and that will lead to fans going, well, how would Usman Nurmagomedov do in the UFC, because he might be better than everybody else. But if we've seen somebody in the UFC that didn't quite make it go over to Bellator and now they're the champ, look at like Ryan Bader, for example, you start to go, okay, well, there's a step down from the UFC to Bellator, and he's able to dominate over there, but he wasn't even able to, you know,
grab the belt over here.
Right. So I think that was a smart move for Bellator. I think there's some great fights. I don't see Benson Henderson giving him much, you know, these days. Benson's so...
He's been around the block.
Yeah, he's just been around the block so long, and he's a great fighter. He's a legend, but I think the reason he's in there is the name recognition. I think they want to build Nurmagomedov off of the biggest names that they can possibly give him in Bellator, and there's almost nobody in Bellator bigger than Benson Henderson.
Yeah, and you see what Umar's doing in the UFC in the bantamweight division, which we just talked about being the best division in the entire sport, certainly in the UFC as a whole. So to see him doing that, and then Usman rather, dominating Bellator with the belt, it does make you wonder. You know, it's a bad comparison because Makhachev is the 155 champion in the UFC. But if let's say Volkanovski were to win that decision, you say, okay, well, you got Usman over here and you got Volkanovski over there, who's and Nurmagomedov's only 24 years old. So where will the conversation be 2 or 3 years from now? So